I started dreading my mother-in-law's visits. That sentence still makes me feel guilty. Because she's not a bad person. She's thoughtful, generous. She loves Ari more than words can explain. She'd cancel her own plans if he had a fever. She remembers every birthday, every school performance, every tiny story he tells her. If you met her, you'd probably think, she sounds like the perfect grandmother. Most days, you'd be right. So why did my stomach tighten every time she called to say, "We'll come over this afternoon"? For a long time, I told myself it was because she didn't respect my parenting. That seemed like the obvious answer, until I realized the obvious answer was keeping us stuck. The arguments never started with big things. They never do. They started with moments so small they almost felt ridiculous. Another chocolate after I'd already said no. A later bedtime because it's only one night. One more cartoon because Grandma doesn't get to visit every day. On their own, none of those moments mattered very much. But together, they slowly created something neither of us intended. Every time I set a boundary, she looked hurt. Every time she crossed one, I felt invisible. And before long, we'd both started walking into every visit expecting the other one to disappoint us. The chocolate wasn't causing the tension. The tension had simply found another chocolate. Dad noticed it before either of us did. One evening, after she'd gone home, he said, "You know, I don't think either of you enjoys these visits anymore." I wanted to argue. Instead, I realized he was right. I was spending the entire visit waiting for the moment something would happen. She was probably doing exactly the same thing. The strange part was, we weren't fighting. Not really. There were no shouting matches, no slammed doors, no dramatic family scenes. Just polite conversations, with an invisible wall standing quietly between us. Families rarely fall apart because of one enormous argument. More often, they slowly drift apart because nobody knows how to talk about the thing that's actually hurting. I kept telling myself, I just need her to respect our boundaries. The more I repeated that sentence, the more convinced I became that I was right. After all, parents should make the decisions. That's true. Children need consistency. That's true too. So why wasn't anything getting better? Because behavioral intelligence asks a question most of us never think to ask. Not, are my boundaries reasonable, but, what do my boundaries mean to the other person? Those are two completely different questions, and I'd only been asking one of them. A few days later, I rang Nana. Whenever life became emotionally messy, she somehow had a way of making it feel understandable. I told her everything. The chocolate, the bedtime. How every visit seemed to end with me questioning myself. When I finally stopped talking, she didn't tell me what to do. She didn't tell me I was right. She didn't tell me I was wrong. She simply asked, "What do you think your mother-in-law is protecting?" I frowned. Protecting? She's breaking the boundaries. Nana smiled gently. I didn't ask what she's doing. I asked what she's protecting. I sat there in silence. Because honestly, I'd never considered there might be a difference. Behavioral intelligence has taught me that behavior is almost never the whole story. People protect things, then behavior appears. Sometimes we notice the behavior and completely miss what it's trying to protect. Think about it. A parent says, "Please wear your seatbelt." The behavior sounds controlling. The intention is protection. A partner asks, "Will you text me when you get there?" The behavior sounds anxious. The intention is reassurance. Behavior is visible. Protection isn't. And when we mistake one for the other, relationships become exhausting. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about Nana's question. What was my mother-in-law protecting? It wasn't another piece of chocolate. It wasn't an extra cartoon. Then I remembered something she'd said months earlier. We were looking through old family photographs. She was holding one of Dad when he was about Ari's age. She smiled, almost to herself. I loved being his mum. Then after a long pause, she added, I was worried becoming a grandmother would mean I wasn't needed anymore. At the time, I barely noticed the comment. Now, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Because suddenly, I wasn't looking at a woman who wanted to overrule me. I was looking at a woman quietly asking a question she never had the words to say. Do I still have a place here? And for the first time, I wondered if every boundary I'd been setting was accidentally answering that question. The next afternoon, I found myself looking at our last few months very differently. Not asking, which boundaries did she ignore, but when did she feel she no longer belonged? Those are very different investigations. One looks for blame. The other looks for understanding. And understanding changes what you do next. A week later, she came over again. I almost laughed at myself. Normally, before she arrived, I'd mentally rehearse everything. If she offers another chocolate, if she changes bedtime, if she says something about school. I was preparing for another battle. Instead, I decided to prepare for a conversation. Not in front of Ari, not in front of Dad. Just the two of us. Because I'd realized something important. Boundaries spoken in front of an audience often sound like correction. Boundaries spoken in private often sound like care. That one decision changed everything. After Ari had gone to bed, I made us both a cup of tea. There was no speech, no list of rules, no, we need to talk. I simply said, Can I ask you something? She nodded. When I say no to Ari, do you ever feel like I'm saying no to you? She didn't answer straight away. Instead, she stared into her cup. Then very quietly she said, Sometimes. Yes. I know you're his mom. I know you and Dad make the decisions. But sometimes, I feel like I don't know where I fit anymore. There it was. Not disrespect, not control. Loss. She smiled sadly. When Dad was little, I was the one making all the decisions. I packed the lunches. I stayed awake when he was ill. I worried about every exam. I spent years trying to be a good mother. And then one day, he didn't need me in the same way anymore. She laughed softly. I thought becoming grandma would feel like getting a new role. Sometimes, it just feels like losing the old one. I don't think she'd ever said those words out loud before. Maybe she'd never even thought them before. Sometimes the truth only appears when someone finally feels safe enough to say it. Then I told her something I'd never admitted either. I need you to know something. When I say no, I'm not trying to keep you away from Ari. I'm trying to become the kind of mom I hope he'll remember one day. I carry that responsibility every single day. If I keep changing the rules, I stop trusting myself. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I never wanted you to feel I was taking that away. For months, we'd both been defending ourselves against accusations the other person had never actually made. That was the real behavioral intelligence lesson. Healthy boundaries don't create distance. misunderstood boundaries do. The boundary wasn't the problem. The story each of us attached to it was. I thought boundaries meant, please respect me as Ari's mother. She heard, you've already had your turn. Neither sentence was true, but both of us behaved as though they were. And that's what families do so often. We respond, not to what was said, but to what we believed it meant. Nothing dramatic happened after that conversation. There wasn't a family contract. There wasn't a perfect agreement. She still wanted to spoil Ari sometimes. I still wanted consistency. Those things didn't disappear. What disappeared was the fear. If she wanted to do something special, she'd ask. Not because she needed permission, because she wanted us to feel like partners. Sometimes I'd say yes. Sometimes I'd say, let's save that for another day. And somehow, those words no longer hurt either of us, because they weren't deciding who belonged. They were simply deciding what was right for Ari. The biggest surprise was Dad. One evening, he hugged me and quietly said, I've got my family back. That sentence broke my heart, because I'd never realized he'd been carrying the weight of choosing between his wife and his mom. No husband should have to live there. Healthy boundaries hadn't only protected Ari, they'd protected our marriage. They'd protected his relationship with his mother. They'd even protected her relationship with me. Not because boundaries built walls, because they finally gave everyone a place. Looking back, I don't remember the chocolate. I don't remember the cartoons. I don't even remember the arguments. I remember one cup of tea, one honest conversation, and one question Nana asked that changed everything. What is she protecting? That question didn't weaken my boundaries. It strengthened them. Because I finally understood that boundaries aren't there to tell people how far away they need to stand. They're there to make every relationship inside the village clear enough, safe enough, and secure enough that nobody has to wonder whether they still belong. Maybe that's why the healthiest families aren't the ones with the fewest boundaries. They're the ones where everyone understands that love and boundaries were never meant to compete. The strongest boundaries don't push people out. They quietly show everyone where they are loved, where they are needed, and where they belong.